Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be approaching a subject that a lot of people are hearing a lot about this day and age, but sometimes you kind of wonder whether or not they're even practicing that, and that is the ability to live in the present. That's it, right now. Not having your mind wonder about what's going on or what's going to happen to you in the future, or being bitter or upset about what's happened to you in the past. After all, it's only what you can do in the present moment that the real miracles can occur. On the program today, our guest is going to be talking with us about how we can do that and how we can maybe train the mind and the body to do exactly what they need or desire to work in optimal efficiency. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Nandar Isaya. Nandar, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
You're welcome, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here on this new year that has entered in right now.
Now, with the unique name that you have, I thought you would have sounded more Indian.
No, I'm a white guy from the Twin Cities in Minnesota, really. Yeah, basically what happened is that a number of years ago I ran across this very basic, simple teaching called the Art of Ascension. And prior to that, I had been a seeker for about a good 15 years looking for that elusive truth that kept wanting me to find out more and more and more. So the very topic we're talking about right now, the living in the now, is something that I had played with for years, but wasn't really sure about how to go about doing it. Mm-hmm. I'd heard about different forms of meditation, which I tried. I became a spiritual director in the Christian tradition for a number of years. And then I ran across a very simple practice, and to me it was as if I had come home. And as a result of that, after practicing that for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to dedicate my life to sharing this teaching with others. And so I took vows to do that. Not everyone has to do that, of course, if they want to teach this practice. And you certainly don't have to do this if you want to learn how to tap into your greater strength that lies within. Mm-hmm. But then I received a name, and I legally changed my name to that, which is Nandar Isaya. Mm-hmm. And the word Isaya simply means, it's a Sanskrit word that means for Christ or for Christ consciousness, for awakening. And that's the purpose, basically, I feel, of each one of us here right now, is to waken up to who we truly are and to our full potential. And the only way to do that, basically, is to tap into the now, into this moment right here, because as we've heard so often, that's the only time there really is right now.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the most interesting things that I have read or even came to discover some years ago was that God actually wanted to be sought, so he put himself in the most difficult place that humans would even try to find him, and that was within you. And, you know, it's interesting when you look at all the spiritual traditions that are available out there and all the masters and teachers and the like that are out there showing us who we are authentically, or willing to show us that there's so much of it out there. But is it really that difficult for somebody to achieve what we're talking about here?
Well, the only thing that really stands in the way of us realizing the truth of who we are is all these other ideas and thoughts and beliefs that limit us to that actual truth. Mm-hmm. And ever since we landed here on good old planet Earth, we have been basically bombarded with different thoughts and ideas and commands on how to act, how to believe, what to say, how to think, etc., etc. And as good and as loving as our parents were, they did the best that they could, but they passed on to us also that which they thought and believed. And then we interacted with people and teachers and kids in school, and we created all these underlying surface thoughts and ideas that we're not even fully aware of, that limit us from realizing that. And in the very beginning, it was good that we put all of our attention outside of us, because we had to learn how to interact with the world, with the physical world. We had to learn how to communicate, to walk, to talk, to do whatever else is required for us to do so. Mm-hmm. And those are fine, but we're talking about all those other things that we took into our subconscious, and there's those things that again sabotage us from actually being fully, completely present.
Now, do people find it difficult trying to be in the present a lot of times when they come and they seek at least your guidance?
Most definitely, I did. It's a very good reason why. Is because of we've had life experiences, many of which are not that pleasurable, others are. But we have a tendency to look back and regret at times, or wish we had done or said something different, and or to then look ahead to hope for something that we're going to change and be better, and that life is going to unfold the way we really want it to. So it's a natural thing for most of humanity is to be caught in these cycles, or grooves as we call them. It's like in a record player, it comes around and it comes around and it comes around. And as often and as hard as we try to be fully present, most of the time we're caught in these old thought patterns. And that's all they are, really. It's just old habits. And meditation was a way, or is a way actually, to hopefully quiet the mind so that we can be fully present. And there's many, many different types of meditation. But some of them actually try to force the mind, to be quiet. And the natural tendency of the mind really is to seek greater happiness. And thoughts are a natural part of life, so we can't do away with thoughts. We can't force them out or anything because, the mind and the body don't like to be forced.
It's kind of interesting. I was reading about the original founder of neurolinguistic programming, which was Richard Bandler. And he says, when you get your mind chattering away, just simply tell it to shut the up. And I thought, that's actually a pretty good practice because it makes you become aware of just how often you're chattering away up there. A lot of times that you find yourself maybe in a situation that needs a resolution, and a lot of times you might come to that resolution as a result of the filter of the chattering of the mind rather than seeing a situation for what it truly is. And a lot of times, most of those moments aren't what you believe they are. They're usually a lot less, and they're not as harsh as they seem to be, and a lot of times there are moments that are a lot better than you think they are. Yeah, it's just really amazing how we really place a context with a reality in such a way rather than experiencing the reality itself.
Well, absolutely, and that even goes along with emotions. Most of us have been basically trained not to have certain emotions, to repress them, to push them down. And they're not acceptable. And emotions are simply an energy movement. It's something that is flowing through us. It's like a mighty river that simply wants to pass through. But we dam them up quite frequently, and that also causes an internal problem that we have. We start judging them, or we try to change them, or whatever else it may be, rather than simply just allowing them. And that's another form, really, of just being present with what is. Most of us just judge ourselves so much, and then we project those judgments onto others, and we start to blame others, especially in close relationships that we have. But really, the world outside of us is a mirror that's showing us more of what's inside of us. And as we get more and more in touch with the source of all of that, that lies directly within each one of us, like you were talking about earlier, that treasure we're looking for is already right here, right now. We've just got it covered over with all these old thoughts and ideas and beliefs. One of the ways I found out with this practice is, and there's others out there that work well also, is to give the mind really what it's looking for. And it's looking for happiness, the greater happiness. And the greatest happiness of all is the source itself of happiness that lies within us. So if you can find something that takes you directly in, first of all, and bypasses all of those limiting beliefs and ideas and thoughts, and what our practice is based on a simple series of techniques, other thoughts really that are absolute statements of truth based on praise, gratitude, love, and compassion. And whether you think them the way we teach you to think them, or just start more and more realizing that we have a choice at any moment as to how we want to think, we can always look around us and find something to praise. Praise is extremely powerful. We don't even have to believe in it for it to work. All we have to do is simply praise something, and automatically the deeper levels of the mind begin to react, and in a positive upward spiraling way.
That's an interesting point of view, especially for some of our listeners out there who are tuning in to realize that this is a great experiment that you can actually begin in a place such as work. You go to work a lot of times, it's Monday, how many people tend to dread, it's Monday morning, the beginning of the week, and my boss is this, and I can't stand that. And it seems to me that's a perfect ground to really begin to cultivate at least this primary action that you're talking about, which is gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Well, very much so. In fact, studies have shown that more deaths occur at 9 a.m. on Monday morning than just about any other time collectively, in the USA anyway, and that's from the very reason you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But yet I look at a very simple thing as a package being delivered to me, or I go to a store to buy something, and when I begin to just check in and look around to see how that actually got to that store, through a transportation company that delivered it there, from that to a manufacturer of it or a distributor of it, to someone who had committed their life basically to actually make those particular types of things. And it all works beautifully, really, when you think about it, most of the time anyway, because when we go to a store, we go to a gas station, there is something there that we can buy, and it's available. And there's very little all around us. There's little things we can tap into just to simply praise or be thankful for at the same time. And as we begin to do that more and more, what happens is that it begins to replace some of those old beliefs and thought patterns and ideas, because we are simply creating a new habit is all.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wonderful book out right now that was written by both Deepak Chopra, who many people are familiar with, of course, who is a physician and a spiritual author. But then also his co-author on that is Rudolf Tanzi. He's a foremost expert on the causes of Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And works at Harvard Medical School. But they wrote this book called Superbrain. And in there they talk about the lower brain basically being that which habitually just keeps us in the old patterns. Habit. Most of it is just survival type stuff. But the brain is no longer some kind of a concrete, solid wired edifice within our head. It is malleable, and it changes consistently. The cells in there are listening to our thoughts, as are the rest of the cells in our body. And the brain will rewire itself based upon thoughts, so long as they are, consistent and repetitive along the way. And so any one of us basically have the ability, the capability, mentally and physically, to change, our thought patterns. We just get caught up in them because they are such a habit. But if we can begin to more and more begin to actually listen to our thoughts, to witness them, and to realize, as Trinity told Neo during the Matrix, when he opened the door and wanted to run down that road, she said, "You've been down that road before. You know where it leads you." So we have a choice then. Do I want to go down that road again, or do I want a different road? So at any time, then we can change our thinking process. And as we do that, the brain will actually rewire itself to that which we want rather than limit us along the way.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting when a few years back I seemed to be getting a lot of segments that dealt with psychology and the working of the brain. And there were some really fascinating books out there from, authors that weren't bestsellers, but they were still pretty interesting books. And there was one that was talking about why it was so difficult a lot of times, let's say when the new year rings in and people have these New Year's resolutions and they don't succeed with them. It could be losing weight, quitting smoking, whatever it may be. And he went on to explain, well, there's a reason behind that. When you think of what the brain has to do, that there's a lot of automatic functions. For instance, you notice how when you start walking, do you really, have to think about putting one foot in front of the other, or does it just become automatic and you realize that you're on just autopilot as you're walking somewhere? Or breathing, or whatever the case may be, digestion. There's just a lot of activity that the brain is responsible for doing. And so because of this, it burns or needs a lot of energy to do this. So it gets those automatic things to become automatic because then it burns less energy so it can do other things. So when you think about, for instance, the New Year's resolution, I want to lose weight, and so you decide to go to a gym and you decide to change your diet, all of a sudden you sense at times the mind actually working against you because this is a new protocol. That means more energy and more attention into this new direction. So the mind kind of, what it wants to do is trick you into saying, what do you want to develop this new habit for? Things were okay the way they were. I know it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you dedicated yourself to go jogging, from 6 to, say, 7 o'clock in the morning, but it feels pretty comfortable in this bed right now. You can go ahead and do it tomorrow, and it starts to trick and talk you out of this. And the reason is because it hasn't built up that regularity or that habit, as you talked about earlier, and so it wants to talk you out of it, so to speak, so you can get back to the regular protocols. And as I read that, I thought, that's really just interesting that it isn't because a person lacks willpower or discipline. It's just they haven't gotten themselves to that point to be able to have what they need to become successful. And if you can cross that bridge that we all have this, then, change becomes a lot easier. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, it's very true, because we can have all kinds of good intentions. And let's face it, there's that old saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But what
Samuel L. Jackson, you were saying something about best intentions.
Yeah, and it's pretty wild because for years and years I did motivational talks and seminars and programs that I listened to, and I had tapes, and way back when in the 60s I listened to records on it, and I read books. And I remember this one particular one even where the motto was, whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass.
Wow.
And it's true, except for one thing. It doesn't address these underlying self-defeating habitual thoughts that we have, that we're not even aware of, and that lie in the subconscious. So we can have the greatest intentions of all, be using positive affirmations and everything and all of that. But underlying the surface level of the mind, there are all these other thoughts. So we think our positive thoughts, maybe for a half hour even during the day, and then the next 23 and a half hours, here's that old underlying stuff. Well, you can't do that. You're not worthy of it. You're never going to make enough money. You're never going to amount to anything. You're not loved. Blah, 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 blah. That's everything you're talking about. So what we need basically is something that is going to go through those, they'll go down underlying the surface level of the mind, which is where a lot of affirmations take place at the surface level, and tap directly into the source of what we're looking for, which is the source of all good, all happiness, all creativity, unlimited, unbounded, potential that lies down there. And then as a result of that, naturally what will happen is all these old things will simply wither and die. We go down to a root stress and tap that off, and then all the branches will fall away also. And it happens naturally and automatically. There's in the book Ascension, which is about the practice that I learned many years ago, he puts in there, the author does, MSI, that it is actually much easier to be enlightened than it is not to be. It takes energy. It takes all kinds of thought processes and everything to basically, as you're talking about, prevent ourselves from actually achieving that goal that we set up for in the first place. It's very simple as a workout, because the mind is in this old pattern. And it just happened over years and years and years of, intake that we took along the way, the input that we had, and the collective beliefs that are out there, et cetera, et cetera. But as we know, there are, for every one of us that don't step beyond our boundaries, there are those examples throughout all of history that, regardless of what their background seemed to be, they were able to do that. And then they became the examples that any one of us can actually achieve what we want. And the main thing is that, first of all, is commitment. You commit to do something. And you don't do it just once. I know for me, quite frequently, it's not even a daily thing. It's more like an hourly thing every once in a while. Or recommit to it. And that takes a desire, first of all. And then it takes action. Because as we talked about, intentions alone are not going to get us there. It takes regular action. And to stick with it. Stick with it. Stick with it.
99% stick-to-itiveness, 1% effort.
Well, there you go. That's another way to put it, really. Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but then again, that's not always easy for us to do. It wasn't easy for me to do, even though I had the best of intentions and I had all these programs I was listening to, et cetera, and everything else. And that, again, is because these grooves, these limiting thoughts and beliefs and ideas are just underlying the surface level of the mind, just waiting for us to make a different decision, as you said, and then come on in there and say, no, what do you want to do that for? That, man,
Right.
that's going to be work. That's going to be hard. Blah, 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 blah. And so that's the mind basically not being present. It's the ego mind that wants us to be limited. It wants us actually to just be a slave to its own thoughts and ideas and everything. But we created that, so we can create something different too. We can create the mind to be actually that which is a servant of the heart for our greater good. Just like we can basically, as we train the mind because of its its powerful influence on the cells and on the brain and everything, to think differently, to actually experience things differently then.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a commitment. And then it's the follow-through, too, at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
As easy as some practices are, people will think they have to be more difficult and stop doing them, thinking, hey, this isn't really working. Yet the working takes place from the inside out. The healing of the world takes place through the healing of the self, first of all. And that simply is letting go of all the crap that underlies us from realizing our potential right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that when people approach you to be able to, I guess, initiate change, that's usually why people might go to someone like you, is that a lot of times, do you feel like they fake it, like maybe they're making the whole thing more difficult than it needs to be?
Well, yes. I think we've been trained to think that way, that things have got to be hard. You got to earn your way. You got to earn your right. It takes hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It does. All it takes is the effort you talked about before, and the willingness to do it, and then to go ahead and do it. And it's only our old thoughts that come up that make it appear to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really. There's some very simple tools out there that we can use the mind to actually retrain itself. The present moment that we started this conversation with, and you talked about in the very first place, and you did it so well. It is here. It's here, and it's right now. Abraham Maslow talked about the peak experience, which is a great example of what the present moment is. Mm-hmm. And all of us have had moments in our life that we've experienced that we're just absolutely present with what is. The mind isn't wandering around at all or anything. There's clarity. There's no separation at all. There's no thought. We're just absolutely, completely present. It used to happen to me quite frequently in nature. People experience it, and sometimes they call it the runner's high or the athlete's zone or flow, or holding a baby, looking in the eyes of the baby, all different kinds of ways it happens. But that's tapping into our natural state, because that's where the most power lies, because we're absolutely, completely, fully present. And then we put a pure desire into that, and then the universe has something to respond to. It's always been a yes universe. It's there to serve us. Unconditional love is what it represents. But we give it, an idea or a thought or a belief or a goal, and then right away underlying that, we throw in all these other things along with us. The universe is just responding, saying, oh, you want chaos. Oh, you want the same old stuff. Oh, you want that. Oh, all right, fine. I give it to you then. It's your creation. You can have it. We have free will.
And it's so difficult for people to understand that it's that simple.
Yes, it is.
And I think it's funny, and here's something that I found interesting, and this was probably about 8 months ago. I was looking into a program for building websites, and on this program, they gave a list of particular things that would cause you to fail at being able to succeed at, say, building your own website. You don't have to know anything about HTML, any of this. You can just do this. And they say you can do this, and their motto is, slow and steady wins the race. Just consider yourself the tortoise. And I think too many times people want to be the hare. And, When they go spreading off and realize, well, the finish line is another 12 miles from here, they get discouraged, fed up, then they go and they sleep by the rock, and there's that steady tortoise that passes them by. But anyway, one of the things, and it was really an amazing moment, at least for me anyway, as I began to observe after this, but one of the things that would cause you to fail was entitlement. And I thought that was interesting, because how often in any book that's been published out there about you working on self-improvement really talks about entitlement. And I think in America, that is one of the most important things for you to really take a look at, because I believe that it has sort of genetically ingrained into us that we just feel entitled because we're on the greatest, in the greatest nation on planet Earth, where opportunities, you're allowed to express and be who you want to be and so forth, that you are somehow entitled to the success that goes with it. And I think a lot of times, especially with American people, that when it doesn't come to pass as quickly as we want it to, when it doesn't happen, I mean, a good example is lottery, for instance. Let's say building wealth, that's a slow, steady process, but it doesn't have to be hard or as long as you think it is. But the fact is, when it doesn't happen, you tend to get frustrated, give up, and blame. What are your thoughts about entitlement? Because I found that very powerful as I started looking around me and even realizing that, well, I actually have some of that in me. No wonder, and it changed the way I started doing things.
Well, that basically makes us victims, in a way. There's another way to look at it. And most people are victims until they realize that they're not, that they're actually creators, that they're creators at all.
Right.
Creative experience in their life for them to find out more about who they really are. That's not always well received by people, but once they begin to recognize it, that they actually did that and they're continuing to do it, then they have the choice. And it can become a very conscious choice to create what they really do want, then become conscious creators. We've been told we're born created in the image and likeness of the Creator. Well, that Creator we're talking about, they're created these incredible universes, and who knows how many millions or billions of them are, and how many millions and billions of stars and galaxies, and et cetera, and they're all working in perfect harmony. And our body itself is always working in pretty much in perfect harmony. It's just that these new cells that come in on a regular basis, so that 98% of our physical body even is brand new every single year, but those cells, as they come in, are listening to our thoughts. So they replace the old cells in the same way they were before, based upon how we think we are less than, that we're never going to recover from this, that this is a lifetime thing. Again, going back to the blah, blah, blah. So the other thing that came to me, though, when you talked about entitlement, there is one thing we are entitled to, and that is the keys to the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, whatever you want to call it. And that is our birthright. But we keep looking outside for it, and then we think that it's going to be just given to us if we behave a certain way or act a certain way or follow a certain creed or a certain dogma. But that's always, again, putting the attention outside of us, putting our awareness outside of us, and putting our energy outside of us, where the only real way we're ever going to find that peace, that joy, that happiness, that full creativity is taking that journey within to the right here, right now, unlimited potential. And then we create a world that we really want, that's not only for our betterment, but for the betterment of all of humanity. And as we do that, it naturally just spreads out. It's not our job to police the universe or to change others. It is our job to be fully who we are, and then naturally we do that automatically for the best interest of all.
Mm-hmm. I was just reminded of a woman that I knew many years ago who was really troubled and frustrated and decided to, through a friend of hers, begin to attend a Christian church. And so this was someone I used to work with years ago, and so she's going and she's talking about the Bible, and it's interesting when people find a religion, if you will, and they're in that romantic phase where they just can't stop talking about it. And and you wish them well, and that's great, but maybe that's not for you. But anyway, there was a time, and it seemed to go, it was about 3 months down the road, all of a sudden she just simply says to me, you know, I go to church literally every Sunday, sometimes even twice a week. And she says, I really don't feel any happier. And I just simply asked her, so what made you think going to church would make you happier? But a lot of times I think people have that illusion that if they find a religion and they're going to church and they're participating in all the things, you know, just doing all these things, that somehow they're supposed to get something out of all of that without realizing, well, no, this is just a practice that helps you to cultivate this, or whatever the case is. Do you find that a lot with people when they maybe go to the Shia Foundation and you know, they start this practice and realize, well, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought it was?
Well, yeah, it's basically what the people who come to us are those who have not found that happiness or that satisfaction or that fulfillment in their lives. And they're looking for a way to actually achieve that. And so the practice we have allows them to naturally simply do that. But what you're saying is absolutely true, because when we think of church or finding God, it's outside of us again. It's like having to go to this particular building or this place where this person outside of us is talking to us about this God or this creator, this source, or whatever else it may be. MSI many years ago in the Enlightenment book that he wrote, and the very back of it said that any priest or rabbi or minister or teacher of God has no business talking about God unless he has a direct experience of God. And most don't. And it's enlivening when we come across someone who really does, is that that's coming directly from their own experience, from their own heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so the message was very simple. You know, seek first the kingdom of heaven. And then they asked him, they asked the great master, you know, the Christ, you know, where is that? And he said, it's within. It's within each one of you. Mm-hmm. So again, that's the journey that needs to be taken. And that's the ego part of it that jumps up and says, wait a minute, you don't want to go there. You know, and why? Because there's things in there that we have hidden. You know, the shadow part of us that we, many years ago, just forced down, and because it was uncomfortable or something, we were afraid something would happen as a result of it, or we had an experience that was very traumatic. But yet that is where the kingdom lies. It's beyond all those thoughts and ideas and old habits and beliefs. It's right here, right now. And as we do that, again, as I mentioned before, these old thoughts and feelings and beliefs and patterns will simply dissolve. There's nothing wrong with us. There never has been. Mm-hmm. We've just been under the erroneous belief that I need to be fixed, you know. I'm less than, blah, 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 all those old negative downward spiraling thoughts again. So we just simply replace them with something that's, you know, upward spiraling, that comes directly from the source itself and leads us to, and everyone else around us, to our greater good.
Mm-hmm. You know, that brings up a really interesting point of view that I think is pretty necessary to bring up, and that is, you know, the idea of sin. And I was just hearing this the other day as I was commuting downtown on the bus, and I was listening to a young couple talking about the idea of God and perfection, and, you know, well, you know, none of us are really perfect. And I thought about that, and it seems to me the sin is believing that we were born into imperfection, you know, that we don't have everything that we'll ever need. And I kind of wonder, you know, who really started that attitude of the fact that, you know, God is perfect, but you're not, you know, and that we bought into that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been something that has evolved over many, many millennia, over thousands of years. And because basically, you know, a lot of it had to do with survival in years past and all of that we had to, you know, we were less than. But in reality, we're not. We are, and we've heard this before, we are spiritual beings here in a physical experience. But it's not just to experience the physical, it's to actually bring the immortal part of ourselves directly and consciously into this waking state physical world that we live in, this 3D world. Mm-hmm. To experience it for what it is as we bring our own enlightened self forward into it. And then we will see that this actually is paradise. You know, it's simply right now what's happening for many people, it's been covered over. It's with drama, with war, with pestilence, experience, with hunger, with everything else and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, and this is a hard thing for people to swallow, is that every single one of us, almost, 7 billion people that are here right now, have come into this experience as spiritual beings for our own awakening. And we choose that based upon whatever karma we have to bring with us. And so some of it looks yucky, some of it looks great, others don't, but it's what we have chosen before we came here consciously with the help of our guides along the way. But then the veil comes down and all these other things take place so we can actually experience it. But it's all there for us to wake up, for our greater good, and not to get so caught up into it. It's just stuff we create. And beyond that is something so much greater. When I say beyond that is what's here right now, just waiting for us to tap into it. It's never gone any place. It never will go any place. It's always here. It's always present. It's 100% supportive of us, just waiting, saying, here I am, open the door. And let's play together then in this wonderful realm that we have here.
Do you find yourself asking this specific question to people? If life got easier for you, would that be okay?
Say that again, Daniel, please.
If life got easy for you, would that be okay?
That's a good question. That's something that each individual would have to answer themselves. And in reality, I think life, in fact, I know life was meant to be fairly easy, to be smooth, to be flowing. That doesn't mean there's not going to be bumps along the road, or stuff that comes up, but that's just bumps along the road. You get the choice to go over them, go around them, or stop and go a different way, or whatever else it may be.
I remember a guest that I had some time ago, when that bump comes along, he got into a practice that he shared with the listeners that simply goes like this. When you get that bump, whatever that hardship is that comes along, none of us like hardships, of course. We don't like when things get difficult, but he just simply says, what possible good can come out of this? And that's an amazing practice when you actually put it to use.
Uh-huh. Well, there's even another way to look at it. I earlier talked about praise and how powerful praise is, just looking at something and then praising it for whatever it is. And that's always a choice. So at every moment in our life, at any time, we can make a choice to see the yuckiness in something, to see the negative part of it or whatever else it may be, or we can choose to see something good in it or something good in someone else, because there's always that. There is always that, period. So again, it goes back to the old saying of, what you put your attention on grows. Well, a good deal of humanity is putting their attention on the problems of the world, and you're never going to solve a problem, from the same level it was created. You got to go beyond that. You got to go to something so much greater than that benefits everyone. Because as you try to solve a problem, usually you create other problems. So the truth and the answer lies into something that is within every single one of us. I heard a long time ago, and I love this statement, is that there is no such thing as a universal belief or a dogma or philosophy or theology, but there is a universal experience. And that is that which we are entitled to, that I talked about earlier. And that, you want to call it the peak experience, whatever else it may be. But this experience is simply there always for every single one of us. And as we live with that experience, then we are completely, absolutely aware of how we are supported and how we create everything that we do, that we aren't separate from this God being or self that we think we have been. We're actually one with it. It lies right here within us, and that has this unlimited creative potential for the greater good. And the question always is this. I read about this for years beforehand and heard about it. How do you get there? How do you do it? And that's really there's a simple answer to that also. And that's simply find a practice, the practice of Ascension. And is it all right if we just talk a little bit about that too? Or?
Yes, please.
Well, it's a very simple series of mechanical techniques that basically takes the mind itself to the deeper levels of the mind, to the deepest level of the mind. And they're absolute statements of truth based on praise, gratitude, love, and compassion. And you think of these to yourself the way they're taught to you, with your eyes closed for 20 minutes each, 2 to 3 times a day. And as a result of that, you naturally and automatically, your body will get the deeper rest and the deepest sleep at night about twice as much. The mind settles down, it gets what it wants, with the perfect thought. The body settles down, it gets rest, and that's how it begins to heal itself. And the natural byproduct is that stress naturally just dissolves. And then you think any one of these statements also with your eyes open throughout the course of the day. And what that does is it keeps you present. It brings you right back here. It brings the wandering mind back to the present moment. And it prevents stress from coming in. So naturally the nervous system begins to clear itself. The subconscious dissolves basically all the old crap that doesn't serve you at all. And you begin to live your life more in the way it was meant to be lived, in praise, gratitude, love. And then joy is a natural byproduct of it. But it's not the joy that comes and goes. It's the underlying peace that passes understanding type of joy and contentment. That sort of stuff still happens along the way. You're still going to be emotional and all that, but you're no longer going to be caught by it or ride it out. You allow it to flow through.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a website people can find out more about this?
Yes, it is www.the Isaya, ISHAYA Foundation.org. That's www.theishayafoundation.org.
Now, I noticed being on the website that there are other countries that this is in, and so is this something that's slowly growing around the world?
Oh, yeah, we teach all over the world. We've got teachers in different parts of the world. The practice actually came out in the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an ancient practice. It's been around basically since the beginning of humanity. The Isayas are what they call the guardians of humanity, and the teaching has come out throughout different centuries before that in different forms, but it's always basically the same thing, as all the great masters talked about. Christ called it the Father within. We call it the ascended source, the God within. It's the same everywhere, basically, at all times. And so the practice has been being taught now since that time worldwide, and it's at a point right now where it looks as though it's beginning to expand even more and more so.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen from people perhaps that you have worked with, seen their lives change?
Oh, man. In so many different ways, Daniel, I could talk about it for hours.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess just my own example of it is probably what I can talk about best, and that is that I had a very active mind, always busy, looking, back, looking ahead, and that's quieted down a lot, so that I'm living much more and more right here in the present moment. As a result of it, the stress that used to be there on a regular basis no longer is there. A very simple example is that I used to drive up in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul there, and as a salesman for years. And I had some of the worst drivers in the world. I'm sure almost all big metropolitan areas talk about the same thing. But I would react. I would, flip them the bird. I would tailgate people off my horn. I would just, I think I was in road rage long before the term was invented. But when I started doing this practice with my eyes open, slowly but surely, it changed, completely changed, where not only didn't those drivers no longer appear in my universe, but if they did, I was at a different place. So I no longer reacted the way I used to react. Healing has taken place that I never thought was going to heal from a series of accidents I had many years ago, a couple of car accidents. The main thing, though, is that what really heals with this practice is your relationship with your subjective world, your relationship with your objective world, the physical relationship that you have, and your relationship with the source, with the God source, whatever you want to call it, itself. And then naturally, automatically, you begin to send that unconditional love out into the world with what the true meaning of compassion is. And that's not joining someone in their suffering, but it's rather staying in a place that is whole and just seeing that they're going through something at that time. So you offer them a helping hand, but you're not caught or affected by what they're going through.
Fascinating stuff. Give out the website one more time for our listeners.
Mm-hmm. Again, www.the-Isaya, Ishaya, foundation.org.
Very good. Nandar, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Did you have a final thought you were about to share?
Yes, just that we do teach the practice in a weekend format, usually a Friday evening and then all day Saturday and all day Sunday from 10 to 5. But that's all shown there on the website. And different courses are also shown through the course schedule. But the other thing I want to share is that this what you are looking for is already within you. Make that your conscious search and your choice and become a finder, and then you no longer have to keep looking for what you think is so elusive.
I like it. Go get yourself lost in the woods so you can find out where you're at.
There you go. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being on the Beyond 50 radio program. What a treat.
You're welcome. Thank you, Daniel. Have a great day.
Thank you. So we encourage you, the listeners out there, find out how to do Ascension so you can be right where you are when you need to be. We encourage you to visit us at beyond50radio.com. We have a free weekly e-news update that you can sign up there for as well. We'll have a hot link so you can find out more about the Ashiyas, find out if it's something that maybe you want to get started with. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.